Right, we're going to start the second half, and I'm going to give you some backstory. It's really interesting, this. A couple of weeks before New Year's Eve, Phil Kirby from Temple Works rang me up and said, Ivor, we're thinking of doing, he's in the audience, we're thinking of putting an event on a New Year's Eve and we want something weird and wonderful. So, would you like to form an avant-garde rock band and do something for the night? And so I said, yeah, that sounds interesting. So I spoke to a friend of mine, Harrison Richards, who plays bass, said, hey, let's put something together for this New Year's Eve event. And Harrison's flatmate, above him, he got wind of this, and he said, hey, I want in. Now his mate is a theremin player. Exactly. So when I heard that, I said, he's in. He's in. So we had a get together with the musical genius who lives in Wakefield, and we put something together. I thought, actually, it sounds all right. This great, lovely. So we booked it for New Year's Eve, and then about a week before the event, the theremin player, I won't mention his name, I don't want to embarrass him, said he would rather spend New Year's Eve getting pissed with his mates than playing at an avant-garde venue at Temple Works that looks like an Egyptian temple. So he said, fair enough, I can't really twist his arm. So I tweeted and I said, oh, we've lost a theremin player. And Phil went, no, he was the big draw, he was going to... Anyway, there was this discussion then on Twitter, and somebody, I think it was John Toolan actually, he tweeted, he says, why don't you get a saw player? Sounds the same. That was my reaction. So I tweeted, I think there were some theremin players who will be a bit upset that you've actually tweeted that. And he said, no. The theremin was invented to emulate the sound of saw playing. Well, that can't be right. Anyway, this kind of dialogue went with Twitter, and I don't know how this woman got involved, but this woman in New York who plays in Central Park or whatever got involved in the conversation. She said, it's true actually, the theremin was invented to emulate saw play. Here's the Wikipedia link. I thought, that's amazing, who would have thought it? Marvels of Twitter. And as a joke, I thought, don't suppose you know anybody in north of England who's a saw player, do you? Yes, I do actually, she tweeted back. The Yorkshire saw player. I thought, Yorkshire, that's the right bloody county for a start. So I googled it, and sure enough, he existed, this chap. And I was reading the website, and it mentioned Knaresborough. I thought, Harrogate. I thought, well, that's not a million miles away. And I thought, yeah, why not? I'll get in touch with him. So I looked for his contact details, and it was an 0113 number. I thought, it's Leeds! He lives in Leeds! Can you believe it? So I then had to compose this email, right? This is a week before New Year's Eve, right? Like he's got no plans at all on New Year's Eve. This avant-garde rock band wants to do something weird and wonderful at Temple Works, which looks like this in the Egyptian temple, on New Year's Eve. Don't suppose you'd be interested in contributing, would you? And to his credit, he sent an email back. He said, what key is most of the songs in? I hadn't a bloody clue. We make it as we go along, but he seemed game. So I rang him up, we had a little chat. He said, I'll be here. So he turned up, and we had a rehearsal. We thought, that sounds pretty great, actually. That's working really well. And so the night arrived, New Year's Eve. We were in Temple Works. We set up everything organised, and nobody turned up. Not a soul. And eventually Phil said to me, you might as well call it quits, Ivor. It's not going to happen. And the bass player, Harrison, said, well, I'm going to ring my wife to pick me up, and I'll go and watch Jules Holland or something. So I said to him, right, when your wife turns up, she'll be the audience and we'll play regardless. And that's what I did. She turned up, we played, and she wanted an encore, she had a lighter up, and all the stuff. It was really good. But, I felt so sorry for the organisers of the event. I mean, there was so much stuff happening New Year's Eve that we couldn't really compete. But I felt sorry for Charles because he'd gone through all that trouble and he'd learned the stuff and he was so willing. And I said, well, there's this other event in Leeds called BettaKultcha. Tends to get one or two more people than we got tonight at New Year's Eve. Would you be interested in presenting at that? And to his credit again, he said, yeah, why not? So, with the greatest of pleasure, I'm going to give you our saw player of the evening, Mr. Charles Hindmarsh.
Bravo! Oh, it's amazing what you can get in a close-up, isn't it? So yeah, I'm going to talk to you about my passion for saw playing. So yes, the musical saw was a Victorian instrument, not something about the theremin, but originally a Victorian instrument, and it was based on the sort of the stringed instrument sort of sound. And like a stringed instrument, it's got strings. I'll explain about that in a bit. It's virtual strings, though, unlike a violin or a cello. The smallest of instruments, the high pitched, is like the violin. The bigger of the instruments is more like the cello. And yes, there's one in there which is pitched in A sharp. It's a sharp saw. Sorry. The strings are produced by bending the saw into an S shape, and you change those bends. So the smaller the string, the higher the note. And the larger the string, obviously, the deeper the note. So what do you need to play one? Obviously, a musical saw would help because it's flexible. You can go down your B and Q by one, but you might put your thumb off. But you can get about an octave, whereas a proper musical saw you can get 3 octaves. You need a chair, a bow, some rosin, and this little thing here is called a sheet. It acts like a lever, and it just gives you the ability to get more range, more flexibility from the instrument. But the sound is, well, it's quite amazing. And there are quite a few musical saws out there. Most of them from the States. There is one from the UK. There's a French one from New Zealand. They've all got different sounds, whether they're squeaky high or very low, ghostly sounds. And yes, if you like to get your teeth into something, you can play the circular saw, but you play it with a beater, so you might have a whole line of them, and the Chinese play them quite a bit. But sadly, the other instruments that are about to come on the screen, it's a myth. You cannot play folk music, Irish folk music on a jigsaw, and you cannot. And when it comes, for the musically challenged, there's it didn't come. Never mind. There's a coping saw for the musically challenged, or the fret saw for the ones with a nervous disposition. They're the UK stars. Jack Robinson was our most famous saw player, but the others listed there all appeared at one point on the music hall stage or on live radio. And there were pieces of music written for the saw. They're just a few examples, some pretty famous names up there. And I appeared in with the Benjamin Till on the BBC Symphony quite recently. And film music as well, that eerie sound in the film, the whistling. Sometimes, things like Pinocchio. You have a listen to the soundtracks, they're there. You can hear the saw. It's not a theremin, it's a proper musical saw. So I'm going to do a quick demonstration for you. This particular saw is pitched in C, it's a C saw.
Charles Hindmarsh. Charles, enough. It's a Charles Hindmarsh. Let's hear it again. Oh, fantastic.